Okay, so let's start by creating a new project. Select new project. We are gonna name this Cloud NAT Demo. Click on create. We will select that project. Now, first thing we want to do is we want to create a virtual machine without the public IP and observe the behavior. So we go to compute engine and we enable the API. Okay, so the API is enabled. Click on create instance and we are gonna name this instance 1. We are gonna leave everything default, change the machine type to E2 micro, and we scroll down all the way to advanced options, networking, and select the network interface and look at the external IPv4 address drop down, change it to none. This will stop the virtual machine to have public IP address, and we click on create. Okay, now just by observing it on here, you can see that it has internal IP, private IP, does not have external IP, which is public IP. So let's SSH into the system and do a simple update, right? Sudo apt-get update -y. See what happens. It is gonna try to connect to the repo and download the updates, but it cannot because it does not have internet access, right? So now how do we get this machine to reach internet and download the updates, and so we can keep this system secure, right, or up to date? So let's terminate that and let's go and do our setup for the NAT. Okay, so in order to set up the NAT, the first thing we want to do is we want to reserve IP addresses which we will assign to the NAT, and go from there. So first thing we want to do is we want to go to VPC network, go to IP addresses, click on reserve external static IP address. This IP address belongs to the virtual machine that we created, the internal, so just ignore this one, and we are gonna name this Cloud NAT IP generic. I'll tell you why I named it as generic. You will see it later, right? So let's click on reserve. Now our static IP address is created. So let's go to Cloud NAT and click on get started. We'll name this my awesome Cloud NAT gateway. Network will be default, region US Central 1, router, create new router. We are gonna name this my awesome cloud router. Leave the default network and everything as is, click on create, and there are two drop downs here. Cloud NAT mapping, source, we are gonna just leave that one as is. For the Cloud NAT IP address, click on it and say manual IP address 1. Select the IP address that we created in the previous step, Cloud NAT IP generic, and Cloud NAT rules. What this tells is if there is traffic going to any destination, which is what 0000/0 means, then use this particular IP address, which is the same IP address that we just selected, right? And it's the lowest priority rule, right? Remember, we are gonna have a demo. One of the step in the demo will be to work with creating multiple cloud net rules, and I will explain what these rules are and how you can use them. So for now, let's keep this simple. Click on create. Now my cloud net gateway is up and running, right? So what I will do is I will go to my compute engine, and I will SSH into it, and I will just clear out the prompt, and I will say same thing, sudo apt-get update -y, and you can see it is working just fine. Now it can connect. We didn't change anything on the virtual machine, we just created a NAT, and now it can connect. Now what IP address will I get if I ask the system to tell me what is your public IP address, right? So for that we are going to execute we are going to ask if config.co, saying tell me what's my IP address, public IP address, and it says this is your public IP address, 34.132.195.155. If you come back to CloudNet, you will see that this is the same IP address that we assigned, 34.132.195.155, right? Which means that the public IP address for this virtual machine comes across to the internet as the IP address of our NAT gateway, right? And because every traffic from this virtual machine goes to the NAT, from NAT it goes to the internet, right? So there is a middle layer in between virtual machine and internet, which is our NAT gateway. That's why every traffic that goes out, it gets the public IP address of the NAT gateway, right? So that's pretty much it for this simple demo. Next we are going to work on the NAT rules and see how you can use them. So let's do that.